All right, episode 4. Did that move? Did I move? Not sure if I'm going to edit that out or not. It is still in my head. Did that move?
I don't know.
All right, we're just going to do this. Episode 4. Today we're talking about conflict because, what was it, a year ago? 2 years ago?
Yeah, almost 3. Actually, that
Was it? No, it was 2 years ago.
It was, 2 years ago.
It was 2 years
Right.
ago.
2020.
2 years ago, me and this guy next to me had a fight that taught me a lot of things and kind of kicked off a lot of some of the learning and wisdom that I've gone through over the last couple of years. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but I'm stoked to have them sharing some of their experience.
Hello, everyone. My name is Graydon. I'm Brandon's younger brother by only a year and a half.
True.
And this is my beautiful wife, Maddy.
And Brandon's partner in crime.
Yes, true. 2 years ago, we were looking at starting a business together, and we had the plans set out for an LLC. And through that plan, we were looking at genuinely starting something that would take over our jobs eventually and grow into something that hopefully was going to earn us a lot of money and be a solid investment, something that could be really exciting too and grow into the future of tech. And through the planning phase and some of the working together in meetings, we finally got to a point where we decided we're not going to do this. And when we decided that, at the time, I was trying very hard to stay balanced and not. I was avoiding conflict, is what I genuinely was doing. I was trying to stay focused on business, not really get into the point of like disagreeing. As little as I could, I tried not to disagree. Finally got to a point where we just had to say like, all right, yeah, we're not gonna do this. And then weeks later, we were having a follow-up conversation, just going over it, and I finally said, yeah, actually, I am really bummed. I think that there were some things that went down that I was not stoked about. And you at the time had said like, why wouldn't you have told me 3 weeks ago? And I said, that's a good question. Honestly, I was afraid. And you said, that makes sense. That's a fair response, but I challenge you to not be afraid. And I was like, wow, that's kind of an intense thing to challenge me on. Where's that coming from? And your response was, and I'll let you tell your side of it too, but your response to me was, if you see the chance for conflict and you see something that's making you uncomfortable and you withhold that from me and you don't give me the chance to respond however I respond and give you a chance to love and to grow with that, then you're withholding a chance for us to be able to grow in our relationship. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, that's true. Wow. And you challenged me, next time you're feeling uncomfortable, say it. And I was like, yeah, okay. Dang. And that was the first time someone had ever genuinely said that to me. And at least to the point where it like clicked, like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I remember, actually, for a little bit of context, I remember you and I butting heads a lot on if someone should say something right off the bat or if they should think about it, maybe process it a little bit, and then approach it later. And I remember being very strong about my opinion and saying, no, if there's something bothering you in the moment, just say something. It's not weird. Just go ahead and say something. Especially, it depends on the relationship you have with the person, but I think between you and I, brothers, if I'm doing something that's annoying you, you can just say, hey, this is bothering me. And I'll just be like, oh, my bad, sorry about that. And then I amend it. But if you don't say something in the moment, my opinion is then it has the opportunity to fester and it gets worse and you can become bitter, and it removes the opportunity to have a healing moment and to have an opportunity to be honest with each other, and that creates transparency and ultimately trust. And so, yeah, but however, I do see your side of the coin as well when you say that sometimes you just need to process it. And I think there's definitely merit to that. So my knee-jerk reaction to any kind of confrontation is typically, depending on the stakes, is to say something right off the bat. But based off of your opinion, that also opened up my eyes to the other side of it, where maybe sometimes it's important to think about it. So
Yeah, and I think that what you say with that, with the processing part of it, is extremely important because some people will get upset and then, like this happens to me. Actually, crazy enough, it just happened to me last night. Um, I when I get upset, I can't see straight. I don't know what it is, but you think of that as a metaphor, but it's not. I literally cannot see straight when I get really angry, and I know Dad gets this way.
yeah.
So it must be hereditary. But last night I was playing video games, a Viking game called Valheim with a group of my friends, and there was one guy on our team who was just not listening to what I was saying, and I just kept like saying it over and over again, and it just was not clicking. And at one point, finally, I was just like, yeah, and I didn't like communicate in a poor way, but in the moment I just remember seeing like it was like I was cross-eyed, like I was just dizzy, I was so angry all of a sudden. And so I think that the processing side of it is wise. If you feel that anger right away, process, but at the same time don't hold back. Once you're ready, don't hold back, like don't prolong that opportunity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think especially again, it depends on the context, but I wonder also if there's anything to be said about the kind of offense that somebody has. Like if, for example, in the context of a game, if someone's frustrating you, and if it would impede on like maybe performance, or maybe it's just not the right moment. Like if you're in the thick of playing a game with your buddies and they do something to bother you, that's not the time to say, "Hey, man, I just want to let you know that really hurt me what you said," and they're not gonna pause the game and be like, "Okay, let's talk about this." And maybe that is an argument of saying, "Okay, let's talk about this later." I don't know. I don't know what you think.
Well, I think people are afraid of conflict. And I think the reason why they're afraid of conflict is because they view conflict as having one clear winner and one clear loser. So they approach conflicts as if almost like it's a, I don't know, like they're having to talk in front of a jury. Like there's a very obvious winner and very obvious loser. And if you're approaching a conflict with a win-lose outcome, I understand why they're afraid of that. So I think having a more healthy approach of conflict, in my opinion at least, is having a resolution that's win-win. I think that most healthy conflicts shouldn't be win-lose. One person's the obvious winner, one person's the obvious loser. It should be a win-win. And kind of along those same lines, I think the goal of a conflict shouldn't be for one person to come out victorious or for one person to feel like they've really made their case. But the goal of a conflict should be for everybody to be able to speak their piece and for you to kind of check your ego at the door and to realize that you don't have to be right in a conflict.
Yeah, like that makes a ton of sense. And I think to me, maybe it was a little bit of ego. I mean, I think there are different kinds of conflicts too. Like in a conflict in a video game, when you're on the same team trying to like, progress towards a similar goal, I think just like a miscommunication type of conflict is probably something that's not that big of a deal, as opposed to having a disagreement over a topic that needs to find resolution. I think that, and like it was chaos. Like there were like 7 or 8 of us all in the same game, and all of us were trying to communicate. And it wasn't just like one time I had one thing with one guy. It was all of us were like stepping on each other's words and talking over each other. And there were a few times when people weren't being listened to, and it happened more than once. And it wasn't a big deal, and I got over it pretty quick. But that experience translates to what we were talking about, translates to, yes, like I'm a processor. So that brings me to the point of this whole episode, which is conflict, and that there's usually one of two. You usually fall into one of two categories if you either like conflict or don't. People who like conflict generally will embrace it, and they don't necessarily get excited about fighting, but they are comfortable with it. Versus the opposite side, where I think I probably tend to lean, where I'm not excited about conflict and I am very uncomfortable in it. Sometimes. I think once I'm in the process of a conversation and I know it's necessary, I will have that conversation. But I generally tend to lean towards being a peacemaker, peacekeeper, as opposed to leaping towards conflict. But the wisdom that I want to talk about specifically here is if you are someone who's comfortable in conflict, the growth pattern is that you probably could get better at being more loving in those moments. And if you're the kind of person who is uncomfortable in conflict, the growth pattern is that you can probably get better at being honest. And so Ephesians 4:15 says, "Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become in every respect the mature body of him who is the head, that is Christ." Speaking the truth in love. I heard it said once that truth without love is cruelty.
That's good.
And love without truth is deception.
Wow. Love that truth of deception. That's heavy.
And so, from both of those sides of it, yeah, if you're speaking the truth to someone, but you don't have that love, you're just going to be bashing them in the face with the truth until someone breaks down. So, that's what I was hoping to make this discussion about. In our conversation where we had that, I genuinely was on the opposite side where I was scared of telling you the truth of what was going on. And so I was loving you, but I was deceiving you because I was saying, like, okay, yeah, this isn't going to work out. No big deal. But truthfully, it was a big deal. And I did not want to say it was a big deal because I didn't feel ready to say that. I was scared that you were going to react in a really bad way. And I thought you were going to say, like, wow, that's how you really feel. And I let that fear stop me from making that decision.
Oh man, yeah. I think it also just depends. I mean, like for example, when you when you have that kind of fear to bring up that kind of truth, I think it really just depends on your relationship that you have with the person. But if you're having that kind of confrontation with somebody that loves you, that you know is in your court, and you know that ultimately is fighting for the best of your relationship, then I think that vulnerability is something to be said about the way that you approach the conflict.
Sure.
So like if you're going to share your innermost thoughts with someone that you know is looking out for your best interest, then I think that there's an opportunity to have a really important interaction where you share your honest thoughts of how you, first of all, maybe if you feel uncomfortable sharing that something is bothering you, that in and of itself is something that should be said, because then that could allow the other person to have even more grace in a future conflict.
Yeah.
But then also to talk about like, hey, this really bothered me, then the other person has the opportunity to show grace. So I think it's just important to just be transparent when you can.
I think it also always comes down to delivery. I think conflict is literally
True.
90% delivery.
Yes.
And counseling 101 will tell you, don't ever use you statements, which I think is a big part of addressing conflict. So instead of saying, you're being a jerk, you're being inconsiderate, you're not attending to my needs, flipping it to an I statement and saying, I feel disrespected, I feel like my time's not being valued,
Yeah.
things like that, already frames a whole conflict. But even if you tell me, I feel disrespected, that still is kind of pointing some sort of blame. It's a nicer sort of blame, but the average human is really not good at getting any sort of blame, and the automatic response is defensiveness. So even if you frame it perfectly, it's also going to take me to healthily respond in a way that's appropriate. And instead of saying, if you say, I feel disrespected, instead of me saying, well, you also did this, or well, I also feel disrespected, it takes a healthy, mature person to sit there for a second and say, I'm really sorry you feel disrespected. What can I do? But that's definitely not the automatic knee-jerk reaction, because I think the automatic knee-jerk reaction is defensiveness.
Mm-hmm. I think that's funny too, because that's definitely something that I struggle with, is delivery. And you and I have talked about this in our relationship of like me delivering, if there's something difficult to say about something, I absolutely am able and capable and happy to approach confrontation. However, my approach can be a little bit more callous than other people can. And that's just because I think my mind I'm more analytical in the way that I think. And so in my mind, I think there's just say it exactly how you're feeling. And when you say it exactly what you're feeling, just like, hey, why did you do that? It to somebody else that will not be received well at all. And so even being empathetic in the way that you approach conflict and realizing, okay, this person, maybe they didn't intend to do this, or maybe it just came from like an honest place. And then I just need to be aware of that as I deliver my confrontation, that will ultimately impact the way that it's received. And I'm definitely still working on that. That's a big area of growth that I'm focusing on right now. But yeah, just having like the awareness of how to deliver something, even if it's just like, I think they call it like an Oreo to the structure of how you deliver feedback, but it's you. The outside is good feedback, like, hey, I really appreciate you for doing this. You'd really do a really good job when you do this. However, I just want to let you know that this bothered me. But overall, I think that you're doing an incredible job doing this. So if you pair it with two good things and in the middle is the feedback of like a bit harsher, the hard reality, then that's like a more digestible way for people to process things. I'm definitely still working on that.
I've heard of that before, the Oreo example. I haven't heard of it called an Oreo before, but yeah, if you start with, actually, it's interesting because you know the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I was listening to wisdom about how that works, with how Jesus in the Bible, when he's praying that, before he gets to the point where he makes any requests, he first blesses God. Said, "Is our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." Like, your name rocks. Like, hey God, your name rocks. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Like, I'm stoked to see your kingdom here, and I hope that everything you want gets done up there just the same as it does down here. Like, he's blessing God. He's saying some positive stuff, and then he says, give us this day our daily bread. And then he has requests. But first, he starts with praising him. And, like, I mean, if Jesus lays that out in the Bible for how to approach, the mightiest of the mighties, then why wouldn't it make sense that we should do the same for each other? Like, if I'm going to come to you and be like, yo, give me my daily bread, versus like, yo, Graydon, your hair's looking sick today. I like those glasses on you. Can I have some bread? I don't know if it's like perfectly translating over, but I don't know if it's like exactly necessarily the same like relation. But what you're saying about, yeah, like when you have something that you want, when you come to someone and say, hey, here are two things that I really like about you, and here's one thing that I wish could be a little bit better that I would love to work on with you. Then that, like you said, is more digestible.
Yeah.
It's because people feel threatened when their character is called into question, and a lot of times conflict is kind of addressing a character flaw or something that they see that could be improved. So like you said, if you start with affirmation, if you start by affirming somebody's character, then if you offer some constructive criticism of their character, it's taken so much better than if I were to say, Brandon, you're a liar. You're doing horribly. You're offensive. You've made me feel horrible. You are gonna feel horrible. If I said, Brandon, I love seeing your leadership. You've been such an awesome example. Your friendship means the world to me. The other day when you didn't tell me the full truth, that made me kind of lose our trust, but I would love to work on that with you because I value your friendship. That's a world of difference in terms of the delivery, and the average human will feel better about that because you've started in affirming their character.
So interestingly enough, just now when you were saying that to me, I felt my mind start to tune out when you were saying like your example of like negative stuff.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you started saying, but I think you're a great leader, somehow my mind immediately snapped back to like hanging on every word of what you were saying. That's so interesting.
None of that was true, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. No, seriously, like I think that
Getting paid out for it.
The good things were true. The bad things were not true.
I know, yeah. So like when I'm saying that so you're saying that positivity is like it's really important to keep a positive tone when you're looking at conflict.
Yeah.
And I mean, let's be realistic. There are going to be times when you're just going to fight.
Yeah.
And you're going to be angry. And like I mean, we've both been through our fair share of experience in life, and we've had all three of us have been through our fair share of experience. I was thinking about family, but like we've all been through arguments. You and I have been through plenty growing up, and you're gonna go through arguments where there's no positivity. But if there's a way that you can force yourself, train yourself, discipline yourself to keep some positivity in conflict, then I wonder how much easier you'll get to your resolution. I actually want to bring up a second story here. Last year, three of us were hanging out, and we were in California, and I think we just gotten pizza, and it was one of the greatest experiences ever. And during this pizza, I made an inappropriate joke. And
I do.
oh, I know you do. And I made a joke, and I didn't actually make it as an inappropriate joke, but I referenced an inappropriate meme that was really popular about a year ago. And I referenced it because the TV that was playing behind us during pizza made something that sounded almost exactly the same as this meme. Anyways, 2 hours later, I was on a date, and we were finishing a drive-in movie. We were just watching a movie, and we were driving, leaving, and you called me and said, "Hey, can I share something with you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "You made me really uncomfortable about something." I was like, "Oh, what did I do?" And you said you told a joke earlier that that I had never really heard before, and that kind of thing was just like it just seemed kind of inappropriate, but it made me uncomfortable, like in the moment. And I was like, "I apologize. I didn't realize that made you uncomfortable. I appreciate you telling me. I won't joke about that kind of thing again." And you were like, "Cool. Thanks." And I was like, "Yeah. Have a good night." And you were like, "Yeah, you too." It was probably like a 90-second argument.
Yeah.
And my date turned to me and was like, "What was that?" And I was like, "What?" And she was like, "Are you okay right now?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Are you serious? Like, he just, like, you guys just had a fight." And I was like, I wouldn't even call it a fight. He just told me that something he did made him, something I did made him uncomfortable. And she was like, "That never would happen in my family in a million years. If you bring up a conflict, it's an hour-long thing, minimum. And both people are going to be angry for the rest of the night." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, no, that's something that we've grown into a point where we can just communicate truthfully and directly without getting to anger." And
I will say, sorry to interrupt. I wanted to say, I think it just kind of depends on your relationship with them, and if they understand that what you're saying is not meant to be mean or offensive, or if you're trying to cut them or tear them down, it's really just like feedback.
yeah,
If it's just like straight up feedback.
Yeah.
Like, I'm the kind of person that if I've done something wrong, please tell me in any kind of way, in my job, in my marriage, or in friendships. Like, I want to know if there's something that I can improve on, just tell me. I will be so grateful. And I'm not trying to make myself look like the good guy here, but I will say I don't know if a lot of people think that way. Some people get deeply offended if you give them feedback, and I think it is partially up to us to foster an environment where we're able to give honest feedback, and for each other to know that this is straight up just to help each other grow. Because all three of us here are the kind of people that just want to grow always.
Yeah.
We're not okay with being stagnant. We want to continue to develop who we are, develop our faith, develop each other, and grow together. And so I think yeah, fostering an environment where you're able to give honest feedback and just know it's not coming from a mean place or a derogatory place, but rather just, hey, I noticed this, you can improve, I know you can do better, I know you didn't mean it maliciously, here it is, that's it, cool, bye, and that's it.
honestly, like, I will never forget how she looked at me like I was an alien and was like checking my face, like, "Are you sure you're not mad right now?" And I was like, "No, seriously, I'm good." Like, I appreciate him telling me. And it wasn't a big deal. He didn't make me feel worse than I needed to, and it was straight to the point. But like sincerely, it like blew her mind, and it occurred to me like, yeah, um, that might be kind of a rare thing, and it probably just takes a lot of work. Like, I think that genuinely the relationship that we share right now as brothers is like one of a kind. For you to be able to say something like that, and for me to be able to receive it that quickly, and genuinely it was like a 90-second call.
Yeah.
And we had a big heavy in 90 seconds, and both of us were good. Like, I didn't harbor anything afterwards, and I think
No, we were both
you were
good.
resolved. Yeah, we were good.
We were good.
Colossians 3:9 says, "Do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices." And Matthew 5:37 says, "All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one." And I think we were just straight to the point. And you said, "Hey, no, didn't like this." And I was like, "Oh, I apologize."
Yeah.
And you're like, "All right, cool."
Yeah. One thing I will say as well, when it comes to arguments, I never want to argue on an empty stomach. I'm so
Yo, true.
I become a different beast when I
Yep.
haven't eaten. And I know it, and I'm very conscious of that. Like, I'm very aware. If I haven't eaten and I can feel something frustrating me, I honestly don't even say anything because I know, all right, I bet you if I eat, this is not going to even matter to me in like 5 minutes. So I usually try to eat if there's something that I want to bring up, and then I'm like, okay, how do I feel now? And if I still feel like I should bring it up, then I'll say something. I don't know if you want to say, share.
Well, I think there's also merit in you being able to hear something and say, I'm sorry, that's right, that wasn't appropriate. Because I think a lot of people could say, well, I didn't think it was inappropriate. Maybe you're the one who's overreacting. So there are sort of like ground rules almost for conflict resolution that I wish they could scrap like public communication 101 in college and change it to conflict resolution 101.
That'd be good.
Because some of them are like, don't react violently or don't react on an empty stomach. I would say don't be defensive. So being intentional about saying whatever they say to me, even if it's totally false, I'm not going to follow the response with, well, that's not true, or I didn't do that. Let the person you're talking to have a moment to say what they want. What else? What are some other ground rules? I would say
When you're sleepy,
when you're sleepy.
when you're sleep
Yeah.
deprived.
Be in a good state of mind when you're having a conflict. Empathetic listening. That's probably the rule
yeah.
of conflict resolution. It's
Oh,
so
that's good.
hard to sit there when someone is accusing you of something and say absolutely nothing. And I think one of the best tools we've been given as a recently married couple has been empathetic listening, which is when someone's talking to you, you literally say nothing. You let them say exactly what they want. There's no interrupting mid-sentence. You let them have their moment to fully express themselves. And only when they're done, then do you respond. I think a lot of times conflicts get out of hand because you're saying something and someone interrupts you mid-sentence with defensiveness and anger, and that's why people get so mad about conflicts.
But also a component of empathetic listening, which is something I also really struggle with, is not even thinking of a response until they're done saying what they're thinking.
Yes.
Because if they're mid-sentence saying blah, 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 and you're thinking about how to respond to that.
What's my comeback? How can I make
Exactly.
myself look okay?
Exactly. At the end of when they're done their sentence, you actually haven't even listened to what they're saying because you're busy thinking about how to respond.
Which goes back to the win-lose mentality. If you're waiting for a response, you're waiting to almost like come in there and swing some arms and be able to win the argument.
Yup. Which it's hard because you're putting the other person first by having empathetic listening, which is kind of counterintuitive because we're oftentimes in an argument thinking about how can I make myself look like the winner here? How can I make myself look like I'm not the one at fault? But when you put that aside and are listening empathetically, that is counterintuitive. And so having a literal blank mind and only listening when you're having a conversation, even if it's just a normal conversation, empathetic listening is imperative in relationships and everyday conflicts, et cetera, et cetera.
Totally agree. Terry Crews, one of my favorite actors, has some really good wisdom content out there. One of his things is that you're at your weakest moments when you are HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So if you ever get to one of those moments, you need to halt.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's good.
Stop and think, because if you are hungry, angry, lonely, tired, that can affect any relationship, any marriage, any situation, any family relationship. You can feel one of those, and then you will not be in your best mind to conflict, or to have conflict resolution. And so you mentioned a couple of them. You said hungry, you said angry, and I think you said tired.
Yep.
And I immediately thought of that. Oh yeah, HALT. Lonely, I think, is also a really difficult one to work through, because you can feel lonely in a relationship. You can feel lonely out of a relationship. You can feel genuinely that you're just missing some human interaction and value. And we're gonna have a different episode on this, but one of the things I want to talk about is love, and how when you love someone, you want them to feel safe, valued, listened to, and special. And if you're in a spot where you're not feeling, if you're feeling lonely, then you're missing one of those key aspects.
Yeah.
And I would even go so far as to argue that one of the goals of being in relationship and taking care of someone and putting someone else's needs before your own is to conquer all those four, to make sure they're never hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, or to help them combat those as they come up. But specifically in conflict, what you're saying about being empathetic and listening with a blank mind is so deep, it's not even funny. Like, legit. It's so valuable to be able to listen to someone and not already have a preset response. Because I've argued with people like that who are just waiting for you to finish your sentence until they can get their point in.
Yeah.
But it is a practice, and I would say if you want to get better at it, don't wait until there's already an existing conflict. You can practice empathetic listening anytime, anywhere. The best time to practice it is when you're not in the midst of a conflict. So if you're hanging out with someone or you're having dinner, ask them how their day was and don't say anything. Let them run through their whole story. That is empathetic listening. It doesn't have to be in the context of a conflict.
Yep.
It's also not glamorous because, especially for me, when I'm trying to practice empathetic listening, and if as soon as they finish their sentence, I'll find myself struggling finding to say something because I'm so focused on what they're saying that when they're done, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm supposed to be thinking about what to say back now. And so it takes a lot of practice and like not rehearsing, but practicing and just like doing it consistently to the point where you just are good at it. It is a learned skill.
I don't think anyone's naturally good at it.
Yeah.
No. Oh, no. That's a great point. Nobody is naturally good at it.
No.
This is stuff you have to learn and grow into.
Yeah.
It doesn't just naturally happen.
Yeah.
There's literally not a single natural good conflictor in the world. You have to grow into it. You have to learn it.
Absolutely. Also, I wanted to share, I think one important thing when it comes to conflict too is communication in terms of like almost borderline over communicating. Like for me, I think that if I had a really long day at work and I'm about to have dinner with my wife, one of the first things I tell her is, I just want to let you know I had a really tough long day at work and I feel overwhelmed and I feel stressed and I feel absent, and it's not your fault. It's just something that I want you to be aware of. Because if I didn't share that information with her at dinner and I'm just sitting there just like mulling while I'm just chewing and she's just sitting there like, what the heck did I do wrong? Then without that communication, then all of a sudden that could create conflict. And so I really do think that even in the sense of over communicating of like, hey, just letting you know, this is what happened today, this is what I'm going through right now, this is what I'm feeling, just sharing those thoughts with each other consistently and having that transparent communication is going to avoid lots of conflict. But even if there is conflict, at least they have the context of where you're at, so that way they're able to be empathetic and considerate of what you're feeling. Oh.
Do you want to go first?
Go for it.
I was going to say something else to add is the opposite of conflict, or one of the opposites of conflict, is affirmation. So I would say if you're generally having conflicts with someone, you usually don't pick a fight with absolute strangers. You're picking a fight with someone who's close to you, friends or family. Mm-hmm. So chances are you love or respect those people. There's also probably a lot you admire about them. So something that we try to practice is just regularly praising and affirming each other. Mm-hmm. Because when that becomes a regular practice, the times that there are conflicts brought up, it's not as harsh because there's already such a nice circle of compliments and praises that are already existing.
Absolutely. You do such a good job of communicating all of your praises to me. You're so sweet to me.
Thank you.
Yes.
Kids, this is your Uncle Graydon and Auntie Maddy. They just got married. How long ago did you guys get married now? A month and a half?
Three months.
Like at least 2 weeks. Sorry.
We're in the first 100 days.
Yeah. That's true. We
Newlyweds.
just got married March 12th.
March 12th.
What's today? June?
Like
4th.
June 3rd or something. Yeah, 4th.
It's the 4th?
Yeah, we're almost at month 3.
That's crazy.
I know.
Dang.
It's very fresh.
Yeah. For real.
Which is why we're doing the groundwork now.
Yeah.
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 While everything's good and there's no issues.
Yep.
It's the best time.
Absolutely. I think especially at the beginning of a relationship, it's so important to have that communication and like figure out your communication styles. Maddy and I don't know if you use a Myers-Briggs or Enneagram or any of that, but Maddy and I are both INTJs. So the way that we process things is very similar. So we are both intellectual, we both are analytical. We are much more thoughts oriented rather than emotions and feelings oriented. So that in and of itself is an important thing to understand when you're having conflicts, because if you are an intellectual, analytical person and you're having an argument with someone that's more emotional, that errs on the side of emotions, then you're already misaligned in terms of your priorities. So if I'm thinking, well, that just does not make sense because there's no reason for you to do that. Whereas the other side of the coin on the emotional side is, that's so cruel. How could you do something like that? Then all of a sudden, there needs to be some sort of middle ground. So understanding how someone processes the conflict and from the way that they think in general is just a really important thing to understand.
Yeah, I agree. Anything else we want to go over? Any last comments? This has been awesome, by the way. I'm so stoked that you guys got to come on here because genuinely, these first 10 episodes are going to be full of people that I have learned from in the last couple years or so. And like, I've genuinely learned a lot from both of you. Just for the purpose of my kids seeing this someday, Maddy and I got to work together last year at college experience, being in charge of the dorm life for a couple months. And there were 3 of us total that were working in the dorm life, and we were the 2, and we got to spend plenty of time around each other, but we got to experience a couple of intense things at least, and go through a lot of just working and growing together. But I have a ton of respect for you, and same for you, Graydon. And I want to say too, one more thing, that Graydon and I did not get along for the majority of our younger years, and I was talking to a friend about this recently, actually. One of my friends was telling me about how she doesn't have a good relationship with her sister and how they haven't had a good relationship for years. And my response to that was that, things change over time. And specifically with Graydon and I, we didn't get along for I don't know, maybe until 4 years ago-ish, give or take. And before that, things were okay, but it seemed like we were in conflict. Like a pretty good chunk of our relationship was conflict related.
I think a part of that is because our Myers-Briggs, aren't you emotion based, and I'm and because I'm analytical and you're more emotional.
I think I'm ENFJ. I don't remember. I need to retake it.
Huh. Well, yeah. So your feelings, and then I'm thoughts, and so because of that, that in and of itself inherently is a recipe for conflict.
Right. Yeah. We're not going to see eye to eye on everything. Yeah.
I did want to say one more thing on top of all of that, just in terms of conflict, is own your mistakes.
Yeah.
Own your part of the conflict. Don't throw ego out the window. No one needs to be the winner here. If you did anything to be wrong in this conflict, own it. Apologize. No one needs to be the winner. The common goal should be we are both contributing towards a common ground. That's what you're trying to contribute towards. You're not trying to say, I came out on top and you came out on bottom. There needs to be okay, I'm sorry, I was wrong, you were wrong as well. You're not pointing out what they're wrong. They're owning it as well. But you both are working towards a common goal of mutual agreement and peace and forgiveness. And so own your mistakes. I know a lot of people that when they make a mistake, it's everybody else's fault but theirs. And it's exhausting. So own your mistakes. Get rid of your ego.
Well, and generally, I'm not trying to hurt you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Generally, I'm not trying to do bad. I'm not trying to be malicious to anybody. But I know inevitably people are going to be hurt by me, and it's not my intention.
Yeah.
But that still means that even if I hurt you, I do still have an obligation to say, I'm so sorry I hurt you. That was totally not my intention. Please let me learn about why I hurt you and how I hurt you so I don't repeat that again. But most people are not intending, some people are. Most people are not intending to hurt you, but you do still have an obligation to apologize if you do hurt them.
And can we agree, I'm sorry you feel that way is not a real apology?
Yeah.
Jinx again. Jinx
Third time.
Jinx
Teach you on me to marriage. No, I said it first. No, me. Stop it. The boy who lived has come to die. I think Santa feels a little buzz. Woo! THEM. Get the picture as if whatever. Duh.
That's the 3rd time they've done that today.
Yeah. That's embarrassing.
That is not embarrassing. That is goals right there. I'm clipping that and sticking that on an Instagram clip. And I'm using that to promote this episode. All right. This has gone for just under 40 minutes. We're at 39 and a half minutes.
Nice.
This was awesome. I'm so stoked that you guys did this with me. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Do you have anything to say to our kids whenever they see this?
Yeah. Dear Brandon's kids, you got a cool dad, even though you might think he's lame and weird now. One of the things I admire most about you, Brandon, is your ability to always push yourself. You are truly fearless. It's something I love. You are always trying new things, and you're always trying to make yourself a better version of yourself. And I think that is really admirable and some of my favorite qualities about you.
I really. Did you just turn it off?
Mom called me. I think we're still rolling. We're good.
We can chop this up,
declined
right?
her. I declined her. Huh?
We can chop this up, right?
Yeah, we can chop it up.
All right, cool.
No, it happened right as she passed you that. Thank you.
Well, one thing I want to share about you, Brandon, I think that you have an admirable trait of always wanting to grow. You work so hard on bettering yourself, whether that's working out, eating better, learning how to cook, teaching yourself new things, reading books. You have a thirst, a desire to grow. And that's honestly like such a strong representation of the fact that Christ is present within you. And I think that that will translate into every area of your life, as well as when you have your future children. And so, future children, when you're watching this, be sure to thank your dad for putting all that groundwork in, because, man, that is only going to benefit you guys more and more as you grow up.
I literally don't have words to say after that. Thank you both. And I want to say back the natural connection that you guys both share is incredible. And I want to brag and say that day 2, after you guys were hanging out, I called 80%. There's a chance you're going to get married.
Absolutely did say that.
And then I said it again at your wedding.
Yep.
And both of you also share that same desire to grow. And I think that you both get the majority of my conversations when I'm seeking counsel, wisdom from others. You get a lot of my questions to help me kind of process verbally and think about what I should do and when I'm in a hard spot. But to Graydon and Maddy's kids, you guys have some fantastic parents. And both of them have gone through some pretty hard stuff. And they've gone through some mountains to get to where they're at now. And the fact that we're all sitting in this room right now and that we're all okay, and we've been through some hard stuff, been through some pain, and we're all still growing, makes me stoked. Mm-hmm. I'm stoked to see.
Bed, kids.
Yeah, and go to bed, kids.
Eat your vegetables.
Go to your room.
I just want to say that I love both of you and that you guys are amazing. And I'm, again, stoked that you're here to put some wisdom down on video. And yeah, I'm stoked to see what the next 20 years looks like.
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Go to bed, kids.